Hello, everyone. Welcome into my channel. Glad to have everyone here. My name is That Therapy Guy Dave, and I'm looking forward to getting to work with every single one of y'all. We're going to dive into different modalities here on this channel. We're going to dive into CBT or cognitive behavioral therapy, DBT or dialectical behavior therapy, or acceptance and commitment therapy, known as ACTS. This first video is going to focus heavily on CBT, learning some skills, practicing some self-awareness, and more importantly, leaving with some practical things we can go ahead and start doing today. As y'all can see from my first video, we're going to focus heavily on a big one here. We're going to talk about catastrophizing and, of course, what we can do to begin to interrupt this catastrophizing cycle. So what we're doing today, y'all, is learning more importantly why we catastrophize and how to fix it. So, we're going to talk about how our minds turn big mistakes into bigger storms, or even small mistakes into storms themselves. Remember, y'all, sometimes the mind takes a small cloud and turns it into a full thunderstorm. Now, this isn't a character defect, nor it is a character flaw. The brain, it's wired to protect danger, and that's a good thing. But sometimes it exaggerates the forecast. Here's our principle as we continue on in this first video. Our goal here is not to eliminate difficult thoughts, but rather to notice them and respond differently. Once again, my name is That Therapy Guy Dave. Let's jump on in. One thing y'all will get to know about me is I love laying out what exactly we're going to go over during my videos. So here's some objectives we're going to go ahead and hit. As we go through these objectives, I want us to go ahead and hone in on what really speaks to us, what resonates with us, so that when we cover that topic, we can really dive in. We're going to explore a few topics. First objective, what catastrophizing truly is and why the brain does it. Secondly, awareness is going to be our superpower. We're going to talk about how awareness can help us interrupt this vicious cycle that is catastrophizing. Thirdly, we're talking about some skills. We're talking about how some CBT skills can help us challenge and reframe this catastrophic thinking pattern. And lastly, y'all, hoping by the end of this, we can leave with some practical ways to slow the mind down when it begins predicting disaster. Like I said, the goal here isn't to eliminate anxious thoughts, catastrophic thoughts, but rather to change how we respond to them. Remember, y'all, we can't hit a target you can't see. Awareness is going to be our first step. Also, catastrophic thinking, as we're going to dive into here, can feel very overwhelming. And remember, this is not a character defect or character flaw, but it is a pattern. And more importantly, it's a pattern that can be interrupted with practice. And again, that's good stuff. Here's an important reminder. Awareness is often the first step towards change. And small shifts, like awareness and identifying these thinking patterns, can really create some big shifts in our emotional experience as humans. Also, I'm going to get us involved as much as we can. So, every piece of information we cover, I want you to reflect. Pause the video, sit with it. Here's our first one. What situations for you tend to trigger anxious or worst case scenario thinking? All right, y'all. Hopefully, we took some time, jotted those down, got familiar with our objectives. Let's dive in. All right, let's go ahead and answer the bigger question here. What exactly is catastrophizing? Well, catastrophizing at its foundation is a cognitive distortion. If we are unfamiliar with distortions, I like to think of it like this. When you go into funhouse, you see yourself in those interesting mirrors, right? Tall, wide, wonky looking. Again, we notice that it's distorted. We know that's not reality. But sometimes when it happens between the ears, it can lead to some worst case scenario or worst possible outcomes. And that potentially be an issue. Remember, y'all, catastrophizing is when the mind jumps from this might be a problem to everything is ruined. And the brain often confuses possibility with probability. So here are some examples so we can kind of jog our memory. If I make a mistake at work, I'll lose my job. Lord knows we've all been there. If this relationship ends, my life will fall apart. Or if something goes wrong, anything, everything will collapse right in front of me. Awareness is key, y'all. Recognizing catastrophic thinking helps us step outside the story that our mind is telling us. Now, these thoughts can feel very real, and I'm not here to invalidate that experience. But why do they feel real? Well, this is because our brain is just trying to anticipate danger, trying to protect us. Here's some little insight for us. The brain often prefers predicting danger rather than risking being surprised by it. And as far as I'm concerned, I don't like being blindsided either. So, this is a protective measure, not a character flaw or defect, just ability to protect ourselves. Now, pause the video if you like. Let's reflect. When you notice catastrophic thoughts, what do they usually sound like in your mind? I gave us three examples here. Maybe they resonate, maybe they don't. Pause the video. What comes up for you? All right. Hopefully, we took some time to do that for ourselves. And remember this, just because something could happen does not mean it is always likely to happen. Let's keep going. Now, we're probably asking ourselves, why do I do this? Why does this happen? Well, let's break it down. Find the foundation, find the root. The brain is beautiful, it's great. It was evolved to detect threats quickly. And hey, I'll say your brain would rather be wrong about danger than be surprised by it. And I'm right there too. Also, for individuals who have experienced stress, trauma, or instability, to name a few, the brain may become especially sensitive to danger signals. So, with that being said, give yourself some grace. Allow yourself to practice the awareness. Leave the judgment, shame, and guilt at the door. Catastrophizing could also develop as a way to prepare for potential harm. Avoid disappointment, because Lord knows nobody likes that. Or maybe maintain a sense of control over a certain situation. Here's a very important reminder I want us to hone in on. Just because the bank predicts danger does not mean the danger is real. And further than that, understanding the brain's intention helps us reduce the shame, guilt, and judgment around this pattern. Hopefully, we're picking that up for ourselves. All right, let's reflect. Can you think of a time when your brain predicted something terrible, but it never truly happened? All right. Hopefully, we took the time, jotted something down, and left the shame, judgment, and guilt at the door. All right, y'all. Let's push on. Ooh, this is one of my favorites here. Patterns, they're tough. They may become solidified too with time. Catastrophizing is more often than not going to follow this predictable pattern or cycle. As you can see here, there's a pattern in front of us. A small trigger can quickly turn a mental avalanche right in front of us if the cycle isn't interrupted. So let's break this down. We get triggered. Again, maybe we get disappointed. Maybe we hear bad news. Maybe we make a mistake. And then boom, the thought, I can't do anything right. What's the point? I'll never get that promotion. That thought is going to bubble up some emotions here. In this case, maybe it's anxiety. Maybe it's depression. Or maybe something else. And this emotion is just going to create more and more distress, thus reinforcing the belief. And pro tip, the longer the cycle runs, the more convincing the story becomes. Here's some examples. Say we make that small mistake at work. As soon as you make it, boom, I'm going to get fired. I'm not going to get that promotion. And the more we have that on repeat and repeat and repeat, anxiety through the roof and through the roof, and maybe some anger in there too. Remember, y'all, the brain is treating this as a fact, having to protect ourselves, or maybe brace for a certain impact. Over time, and again, give yourself some grace, but over time, the cycle will strengthen into a pattern. But as we have found out with patterns here, y'all, they're very predictable. Here's our key takeaway from this. Interrupting the cycle begins with noticing where it starts. In other words, you can't hit a target you can't see. Also, you can't interrupt the cycle we refuse to look at. Awareness is often the moment where the cycle begins to break. So if we're starting to recognize some cycles for ourselves, good job, y'all. It's working. All right, let's reflect right here. At what point in this cycle do you usually become aware something's happening? Remember, y'all, thoughts fuel emotions. Emotions fuel more thoughts, and the spiral grows and grows and grows. Maybe that's why we feel overwhelmed. Maybe why this catastrophizing feels so real. And before we push on, interrupting the cycle, even briefly, can change the entire emotional experience. And that's what we're after here, y'all. Let's push on. All right, step one, my favorite step, good old fashioned awareness. Remember, yo, you cannot interrupt a thought pattern we haven't learned to notice. This video right here, that's what we're doing. The first skill is simply noticing the thought before we react to it. Easier said than done, but with practice, we make more progress. Instead of automatically believing the thought, taken as a fact or a law, this step is simple. We pause and observe it. Examples could be this. I'm noticing my mind predicting the worst. My brain is jumping to catastrophic conclusions. Or even this one. My brain is just trying to protect me, and I see it. This right here allows us to create distance between us and the thought. Sometimes, y'all, we get fused with the thought. This right here, this awareness, allows us to put some distance. And the more distance we have, the more we can see it for what it is. Simply a thought. With that being said, y'all, remember this. A thought is not a fact. A thought is not a law. And sometimes, the better we get at this, the more we discover our minds have been predicting disaster on autopilot. Now, of course, it seems responsible, but again, yo, think of that pattern. Maybe we're stuck in it. No shame, no judgment, no guilt. But let's reflect right here. What physical or emotional signs tell you that your thinking may be escalating? Remember, y'all, we can't hit a target we can't see. The moment we catch the thought, we are no longer fully inside it. All right, into some skills here. CBT, cognitive behavioral therapy, tells us to question the thought. Now, thoughts can feel true without actually being accurate. Once awareness is cultivated and practiced and practiced and practiced, CBT invites us to gently, emphasis on gently, challenge the thought. Questions we can ask could include the following. What evidence supports this thought? What evidence does not support this thought? Are there any other possible explanations? Pro tip, the goal is not forced positivity. Some people call it toxic positivity, and I'm here to tell you that's not the goal here. The goal is balanced. We could arguably even say neutral. Here's the core principle here, y'all. Balanced thinking or neutral thinking helps us return to reality. And sometimes the brain needs some evidence before it begins to calm down. Remember, y'all, we're in protection mode here. And asking a few curious questions can weaken and weaken the power of a catastrophic thought. Let's reflect right here. When it comes to questioning the thought, consider this. When you question a catastrophic thought, whatever that may be for you, what alternative explanations might exist? Remember, y'all, curiosity is often stronger than anxiety when we use it intentionally. And right here, this is when we're using curiosity with intention. This next skill is called The most likely outcome method. Our brain, as much as we love it, jumps to worst case scenario. But life usually lands somewhere in the middle. Again, y'all, balance thinking. Not ultra positive, not ultra negative, but somewhere in the middle. Catastrophizing thinking focuses always purely on worst case scenario. CBT invites us to consider a few things: worst case scenario, best case scenario, or even most realistic scenario. And as I said before, life happens somewhere in the middle. Think of it this way, y'all. We need to widen our perspective. And the more we begin to widen our perspective on life, the disaster story often begins to lose its power. And balanced thinking, as we are seeing here, opens the door to calmer emotion. Here's a little insight for us to remember. The mind often skips over the most realistic outcome. Not a character flaw, not a character defect, but hey, it happens. So there's some insight for you. Give yourself some grace. Let's take some time to reflect. When your mind predicts disaster, what might the most realistic outcome be instead? Remember, y'all, this is about practice making progress. Because perfection doesn't exist. Realistic, realistic, realistic. Taking some time to widen our perspective. All right. That's what we call the most likely outcome. And it gets better with practice. So get your reps in, passion grounding. Now, while this term gets thrown around quite a bit, and it can mean a lot of different things to different individuals. So my thing, get to know yourself. What works for you? When catastrophic thinking escalates, the body will move into a stress response. And again, y'all, it's to protect us, which is a good thing. But if this cycle continues, it might not become that good overall. Also consider this: an anxious nervous system makes catastrophic thinking that much louder. And when the body calms down, the mind typically follows. Now, this is just 4 groundings tools. Of course, it's not an end all be all list, so do some research. What works for you? Is it slow breathing? Is it noticing our physical surroundings? Maybe it's naming objects in the room. Or maybe it's simply returning our attention to the present moment. Remember, y'all, calming the body helps the mind think more clearly. I like to put it this way: ground the body first, then change and challenge the mind. If we follow that order, we'll see some success. Let's take some time to respond. What grounding techniques have helped you calm your mind during some stressful moments in the past? We all have some wins in there. Here's the time to go ahead and recount those, jot them down, make ourselves more aware of them, which is, of course, our goal for this video. Next, we're going to talk about practice, 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 and more practice. Remember, y'all, practice does not make perfect. Practice makes progress, because perfection simply does not exist. So, challenging thinking is going to take some practice and, of course, some patience. The brain changes through repetition, not through one perfect moment. Each time we interrupt this catastrophic cycle, we weaken the habit, loop, and pattern, which is a good thing, y'all, which is what we are after. So over time, we can move from automatic catastrophizing to awareness, to questioning the thought, to balanced thinking. So practice that awareness, y'all. Get those reps in, because we're learning new pathways in the process. Let's take some time to reflect when it comes to practicing, practicing, and practicing. What is one small step you could take to pause and challenge a catastrophic thought loop this week? Remember, y'all, every small pause creates a new pathway in the brain. So be intentional. And progress often looks like catching the thought earlier than before. That's all this game is, y'all. In closing, We covered a few things here, y'all. Catastrophic thinking, the loops and patterns they create, and a couple of skills that help us interrupt the cycle. Remember, y'all, self awareness or awareness in general doesn't change anything. Rather, it interrupts the cycle and gives us the opportunity to choose what to do next. Catastrophizing often begins as a protective instinct. It's not a character flaw or defect, y'all, but it can create some unnecessary distress when it becomes automatic. Through awareness and some skills, we can begin to slow down these patterns and respond with greater clarity and some balance. And hey, y'all, healing overall involves learning how to simply observe thoughts without letting them control us. And mental freedom, which is what we're all after here, right? Mental freedom begins when we stop treating thoughts as automatic facts and laws. So remember this, y'all. You are not your thoughts. You may still have anxious thoughts, but you no longer have to believe every single one of them. And learning to challenge these catastrophic thoughts can dramatically change how we experience stress or simply life as we know it. We are not our thoughts. We're the ones who can choose how to respond to them. Here is my final reflection prompt for everyone in this video. What is one catastrophic thought pattern you would like to begin noticing and interrupting moving forward in your week, in your day, maybe for the rest of the year? All right, y'all. It's been a pleasure. Appreciate y'all tuning in. Again, my name is That Therapy Guy Dave. And hey, hope to see you soon.